From the Netflix series Painkiller, all of human behaviour is essentially deprived of two things: run away from pain or run towards pleasure. Yo Bar, what's up and what's happening? And welcome back to It's the Yo Bar series with me, Chris Harding. In today's video, I'd like to discuss my thoughts and honest opinion on one common enemy that the majority of people face in their lifetime, and that is manufactured food companies. Companies that make and sell foods that are marketed and sold to us in a specific way, such as high in protein and low in fat, and why those companies are seemingly trying to build trust with you, the consumer, through affiliation, branding, and targeted marketing. But first, I want to tell you how my thoughts and my opinion have been formed over the past few weeks. So I'm a nutrition coach by trade, and I help people to reverse their type 2 diabetes. And as a coach, I see it as an obligation to my profession and to my body, as well as my clients, to choose and eat as cleanly as possible. However, that being said, I do like the odd sugar-free drink from time to time. It's a small pleasure and one that I don't take too seriously. Of course, I am completely aware that there have been studies on these fizzy drinks, and the jury is still hung on whether or not diet drinks cause long-term health issues, or if they're just drinks that serve no benefit, nor does it serve a detriment as such. I was at a party back in late September 2023, and I was talking to one of the guests there about the marketing, branding, and misuse of foods, drinks, including beverages such as alcoholic drinks. Now, I personally don't drink, so I tend to stick to diet sodas, and the guy that I was talking to said, if you really knew that what was inside the drink, you'd choose not to drink it. Oh, you're referring to the chemical sweetener in it. Yes, and the dye and the acids and other things to make it taste like sugar. So I chose not to respond with a reply, as I could feel that the discussion was turning into a debate, and I didn't want that type of conversation at a dinner table. But it did get me to think, and what the guy did leave me with was a suggestion. Have you read the book Ultra Processed People? No, I can't say that I have. Read it. It will change your mind. So as a nutrition coach and working with diabetics and people who suffer with chronic weight issues, you tend to find a lot of your spare time is spent reading articles, books, and also research papers. And the one thing that has struck me over and over again is that we don't realize our food is being marketed to us on a mass scale. We are so used to it, it's normal for us in the UK and other well-developed countries around the world. Large food corporations spend millions of pounds on advertisement for their products so that we consume more and more refined processed foods. And it's obvious that it has a massive effect on our psyche because we can't seem to stay away from processed foods. An example of this seemingly odd world we live in, where our food is not only broken down, processed, packaged, and also marketed to us, but it is the paradox of the diet processed foods and beverages being sold as a weight loss product. So in 2012, Donald Trump made a series of tweets about Diet Coke and stated, "I've never seen a thin person drinking Diet Coke," and although these comments were biased to a degree, the comment actually made a lot of nutritional sense. What his tweet had to do with your health is actually a lot more accurate than you might think initially. Let's use diet drinks as an example of how a person can become more obese by drinking something that's supposed to help them to lose weight. The main word I want you to remember here is density. Why do I want you to remember that word? Well, I'll explain why in a moment. Diet drinks, although low in calories and perhaps sugar, still make a person more likely to put on weight, and here's why. Let's take a Diet Coke for instance. 0 sugar and low in calories, but it tastes sweet, and that's because of the additives that mimic the taste of sugar. Not saying that sugar is any good for you, nor am I saying it's bad for you. But what I am saying is that on average, people who consume diet drinks tend to become accustomed to the sweeter taste of the beverage, even though they're additives. In turn, this forces the body to spike its insulin levels, the hormone that governs macronutrients in and around the body via the bloodstream. But although insulin has risen, the sugar never arrives as the drink is made of artificial sweeteners, and that's when the body starts to have a craving for sugary sweet foods and beverages to satisfy that desire for sugar. This then means that the likelihood of the person turning to a more compact, more calorie and sugar-dense junk food is much higher than if the individual were to drink something like water, for instance. The density of the food that the individual consumes more often than not means that they are eating a lot more calories than, say, something like a 400-gram piece of steak. So where the comparison between whole foods and processed foods comes down to is the individual. Not to say that it is their fault, but their health is largely subjective to the types of foods and drinks that they consume. All manufactured foods are based on producing cheap and longer-lasting alternatives to the more natural version. Plus, at the same time, these big food corporations are advocating that the crap that they're selling is good for you. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Their ambiguous claims about their food and how they're supposed to be bettering you when all they're really doing is benefiting shareholders' pockets, while you get closer and closer towards a shit lifestyle, which is less than ideal. It's almost criminal. It seems that every packaged food we choose becomes a thwarted attempt to resist the temptation and often inevitable fact that we're going to buy something that contains a high volume of ingredients, additives, colors, emulsifiers, and empty calories, and that's quite literally making us ill. If we're going to be forced to buy the crap that large food corporations are selling, then think of it this way. If I were to suggest to you that I'm going to sell you or your family member something that could potentially make you very ill in the long term, surely you'd say no. But if I were to suggest to you that you would start receiving nutritionally balanced and low-level profit whole foods that are not to the demise of you, the consumer, that the advertising and promotions of foods offer benefits that come with fresh whole food, including vegetables, then wouldn't that solve the problem? In fact, wouldn't it solve many of the world's problems we face today? A big one, for example, is climate change. No, and here's why. Because there's not enough money to be made from a broccoli. In fact, broccoli probably retails at a loss, the way most fresh produce probably does, but you'll never in your life see an advertisement for fresh foods that's marketed to you. Natural whole foods can't compete with UPF as it doesn't offer the highly sweetened, ultra soft and salty tastes and textures the way that processed food does. And why would you want to when UPF is much cheaper to produce and holds a longer shelf life? As they say, let an accountant take charge and watch the margin squeeze tighter and tighter. Now, we don't stop to think about the retailer in this argument for better unprocessed foods, but the retailer does have a big role to play in all of this as well. They are, after all, there to achieve one thing only, and that's profit. And they make a gross amount of profit from the highly processed foods, alcohols, and sweetened beverages that they sell to you and I every single day. I guarantee that when you walk into your local grocery store or supermarket, the UPF is on offer, prices slashed and too good to miss out on. But there's a catch. Buy cheap and buy twice, but not with your money, but rather with your waistline and with your health in jeopardy. Not to mention, you now have a 2-for-1 deal, and so you can have extra if you feel the need to. It's only going to add to the addiction. One client of mine who has experienced this firsthand is my client Andy. When I first met Andy, he was at his heaviest he'd ever been at 121 kilos and suffered from a fatty liver, diabetes, and to top it all off, quite saddening, he was suffering from severe depression and low self-esteem. Andy had suffered with his weight for most of his adult life, but by his mid-30s, his weight was an issue. Not only did Andy have metabolic problems that were potentially life-threatening, he couldn't see a resolve or a way out. So to put it into context for you, Andy was a real-life junk food junkie. Before changing his diet and lifestyle for the better, Andy ate and drank fast food for convenience, ease, and one other thing that may not seem so obvious to anyone at first. He ate and drank fast food so that he could try to lose weight. So you mean to tell me that a Big Mac is going to shed pounds of fat off of my body? Not quite. What I mean is, Andy chose to make his choices based on his beliefs that diet drinks, diet or low-fat foods would make an impact on his health and betterment in his life. But he was wrong, and this is the scary bit. Let's take mayonnaise as an example. Real mayonnaise is actually made from 4 ingredients: eggs, which bind and act as emulsifier, oils, vinegar, and mustard powder. And that's it. But for food companies like Hellmann's and Heinz, it's a lot cheaper to replace expensive ingredients with cheaper alternatives, such as additives and chemically refined ingredients and emulsifiers that can withstand a longer shelf life, be squeezed easier, and keep the texture or the appearance of texture at least, whilst keeping the costs down. You see, it's all about the margins. So the bottom line is that we're all drinking from the same well, except this well is poisoned, and in return, it poisons us. So what can we do to make our health and longevity better for us and the future generations? So what steps do we need to take to tackle our common enemy? Firstly, it's unlikely that anyone is going to be able to afford to take these huge corporations to court. Governments have had difficulty in getting them to take responsibility and accountability for much of the damages caused to public health. Plus, corporate profits means that more taxation on their products that they sell. So perhaps in the short term, for them, the government, it's a fair trade. But what about you? What's fair for you? I wouldn't start with the food corporations such as Nestle, Unilever, and Mars, just to name a few. What I would suggest is that, like everything in life, if you want a job done right, you need to do it yourself. And therefore, when it comes to processed foods, your health and the health of your family starts at home. If you're concerned about what's going into your food, actually scratch that. If you care about your health and waistline, then I suggest you look at how much processed versus whole foods you consume. So if you got this far and you still give a shit, then I suggest you do these 3 easy things. Start eating meals together with family, friends, and colleagues. Enjoying a meal you prepare together or for someone you love is easy, healthy, and fun. Cook your meals from scratch and make them easy enough to prepare and eat without spending hours in the kitchen. Replacing your processed oils and cooking fats with butter and or olive oil is a good way to keep away from those nasty, oxidative, damaging oils and fats. And just to finish, guys, I want to be able to read this paragraph from you from the book Ultra Processed People. If we think of emulsifiers that have been added to our food to preserve it, keeping the shelf date for longer and to prevent the bacteria levels from reaching far beyond the manufacturer's control, they act like a detergent, scrubbing the gut of all of the healthy bacteria in the microbiome. Unlike natural emulsifiers such as eggs and milk, processed emulsifiers seem to have the opposite effect, destabilizing the environment of the gut. When I think about the food industry, I think about how the food that it mass-produced is not a part of our natural evolutionary history with food. All mammals, including humans, have had to evolve with the food that's available to us. This is because pre-agricultural revolution, we had to battle for our food, compete and kill for our food. But UPF defies this rule. Instead, it blends, distills and processes them into other more unknown particles of food that our digestive system just can't handle. And this is where science is beginning to unveil the notion that the food companies are lying to us. Not only this, but the food itself is soft, often creamy in texture. And when you think about it, a food that is soft in the food chain doesn't actually really exist naturally. Food found naturally is often crunchy, takes time to break down by the jaw, and this leads me on to how these highly dense soft foods can hide a huge amount of processed sugars, fats, and additives that surplus your energy needs far greater than those foods that are found naturally. As I stated previously in this piece, reward hormones are an ancient system designed to favor the gathering of food, procreation, and socializing, just to name a few prehistoric human pastimes that encourage the next generation's success. So when a prehistoric system is hijacked by a more modern-day drug, you can start to see quite clearly where the reward may become the problem. So if you take food companies, for example, in today's society, food is sold on a shelf, and we trust in the companies that make the food to look out for our best interests. Take each product that's sold to the consumer to the paramount of health and well-being. But in actual fact, as it always is, food companies focus more on their financial bottom line rather than your health requirements. Ask any addict specialist and they'll tell you openly the location of where the alcohol is sold and how strong the alcohol is distilled will determine the outcome of the addiction. Another example of addiction is the way in which the tobacco cigarette burns. This determines how fast a person can get addicted to the nicotine. The more highly processed, dense in calories, and refined the food, the quicker it becomes consumed and therefore becomes addictive. Speed of ingestion is really important for addiction. And the food companies know that the speed of ingestion is really important for the addiction to continue, and therefore you will continue eating that food. Just to finish, guys, the book Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke describes this in so many varying levels of addiction that it's hard to argue that we live in a world where the average person can be quite easily manipulated and controlled by just a few cheap substances that can be produced on mass scale and consumed at an alarming rate. So guys, I hope you found this video insightful and interesting. Please remember to subscribe, like, and also comment below. And if you want to take my type 2 diabetes quiz, then press the link in the comment box below. Until next time, be fit, be healthy, and of course, be a boss bar.
It's the Yo Bossy